Dusk painted the New Mexico sky with bruises of purple and red, shadows stretching across the battered fences of Whitaker Ranch. The wind carried dust and secrets, rattling the sagging barn doors and whistling through the cracks in the bunkhouse walls.
Being locked up.
Somewhere out in that restless dark, a boy moved, thin, silent, hungry. Liam Gray pressed his back against the cold boards, heart thudding. His bare feet whispered over the hard-packed dirt. 14 years old, but smaller than most. All sharp bones and faded scars. He could slip between the world's cracks if he had to. Tonight, he had to. The others were asleep, bellies full of beans and bitterness. But Liam had nothing but the scrap of bread hidden in his fist and a desperate hope gnawing his insides. He crept past the main house, where the windows glowed with light and the ranch owner's laughter rolled out like thunder. Claire Whitaker didn't care if the orphans she took in went hungry, so long as the work got done. Liam had learned long ago that asking meant a beating, and crying meant worse. The corral stood apart from the other pens, surrounded by extra-high rails and strung with warning signs. Inside, something shifted, a shape darker than midnight, muscle and anger bundled tight. Shadow. The black stallion, untamed and unbeaten, the devil's own horse, they called him. Men wouldn't go near him except with ropes and clubs. No one could ride him. Some said he'd kill a man just for looking at him wrong. Liam ducked under the lowest rail, breath shallow, and stood motionless in the dark. The air smelled of sweat and rain, electricity crawling on his skin. He could see the stallion's eyes, 2 chips of obsidian glittering in the gloom. "Easy, fella," Liam whispered, holding out his palm. "It's just me, Liam." Shadow snorted, stamping the earth, head tossing. Liam didn't move. He'd learned that too. Let them come to you, don't reach or grab. He crouched low, setting the hard lump of bread on the ground between them. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. This was for Shadow. He didn't know why, not exactly. Maybe because he saw something in the horse's eyes, something wild and trapped and angry, something that matched the ache inside himself. He waited, shivering as the night pressed in. Minutes stretched, slow as molasses. The stallion circled, nostrils flaring, hooves slicing the dirt. He stopped just out of reach, ears pinned back. Liam's voice dropped lower, gentle. "I know what it's like, you know? Being locked up, being beat for no reason. Nobody listens when you scream. They just say, 'Work harder, boy, or you don't eat.'" The wind rattled the corral gate, making Liam jump. He held still, forcing himself not to run. He didn't dare look away from Shadow. The horse was watching him, something wary and wounded flickering in those dark eyes. "I ain't here to hurt you," Liam said, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I just didn't want you to be alone tonight." A long silence. Shadow took one step closer, then another, muscles trembling under his midnight coat. Liam's breath caught. The horse stretched his neck, sniffed at the stale bread, and finally, delicately, almost shy, took it between his teeth. Liam let out the smallest sigh, feeling his knees go weak. He stayed low, not daring to move or smile or make a sound. Shadow chewed, crumbs falling to the ground. For the first time since Liam had arrived at Whitaker Ranch, someone had accepted a gift from his hand. The stallion stood over him, silent now, eyes locked to the boys. Liam felt the world contract to just the two of them. No fences, no hunger, no cruel voices in the dark. Only a wild horse and a broken boy, each carrying a storm inside. Time passed. The moon climbed higher, casting silver across the corral. Liam talked in a soft, steady rhythm, not caring if Shadow understood the words. He told him about the orphanage back in Albuquerque, the way the matron's shoes clicked on the linoleum, the taste of watered-down soup. He whispered about the day the sheriff had come, said, "Work on a ranch'll make you a man, son." He confessed how he'd wanted to run, but his legs just wouldn't move. Shadow's ears flicked, but he didn't bolt. He didn't lash out or bare his teeth. He simply stood there, listening. Far off, a coyote called, lonely and sharp. Liam hugged his knees, shivering. His skin burned where bruises hid under his shirt. He didn't cry. He never did. Not anymore. "I should go," he murmured, pushing himself to his feet, slow and careful. "If they catch me out here, Claire'll skin me alive. But I'll come back, I swear. Tomorrow night. If you want me to." He waited, holding his breath, but Shadow didn't move. The stallion's gaze followed him, intense and almost curious. It was the first time Shadow hadn't charged or shied away. He'd simply watched, silent, with those haunted, intelligent eyes. Liam slipped back through the shadows, the echo of hope warm in his chest. Maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe he'd found a friend, or maybe, just maybe, he'd found someone who understood. Behind him, the wind rattled the corral once more, and in the darkness, two outcasts waited for morning, each a little less alone than they'd been before. The nights grew colder, each one heavier with the threat of winter. But Liam returned to Shadow's pen every time the ranch slipped into sleep. He moved like a shadow himself, always careful, always watching for the swinging lantern of a night patrol or the distant crunch of boots on gravel. Danger stalked him, but something stronger called him back to the corral, a wild hope, the memory of that first silent truce between a wounded boy and an untamable horse. Liam scavenged scraps wherever he could. A heel of bread, a piece of salt pork filched from the kitchen, sometimes just a bruised apple left in the dirt. He saved it all for Shadow, tucking his own hunger deep inside. Each midnight, he crouched by the fence, talking softly, letting the horse catch his scent before he ever made a move. Sometimes he told stories about Albuquerque, about the lost dog he'd once cared for, about dreams he was scared to say out loud. Other nights, he just sat in silence, breathing in time with the big animal, letting their stillness speak. Shadow began to change. At first it was just curiosity. He'd edge a little closer, nostrils flaring. Then, one night, Liam held out his palm with a sliver of pork, and the stallion stepped forward. He felt hot breath on his skin, the brush of whiskers, the gentle nudge of a soft, velvety muzzle. Liam swallowed, afraid to move, afraid it was all a dream. The bond between them grew, slow and careful as the sunrise. Shadow began to greet Liam at the fence, ears pricked forward, his usual wildness muted. If Liam was late, the stallion would pace, snorting and tossing his head. But when the boy arrived, always quiet, always gentle, the horse would calm. Sometimes Shadow pressed his massive head against Liam's chest, letting the boy stroke his forelock or scratch behind his ears. Each touch was a miracle, fragile and fierce. But on a cattle ranch, secrets didn't last long. One night, as Liam slipped through the shadows, he heard voices, low, rough, and too close. He ducked behind a pile of lumber, holding his breath as two ranch hands passed. The men were laughing, swapping stories about the devil horse and the fool kid, who'd probably end up dead if he kept hanging around. Liam waited, nerves jangling, until the footsteps faded. Only then did he cross to Shadow's pen, his heart pounding. He didn't know the men had already noticed changes. The wild stallion had stopped charging the rails at feeding time. He no longer tried to kick down the fence when someone passed. It was enough to set tongues wagging, and on a place like Whitaker Ranch, rumors grew like weeds. Within days, everyone was whispering about the Whisper Boy. Some spat the nickname like a curse. Others eyed Liam with a strange respect, as if he carried a secret power. Liam kept his head down, working harder than ever, never giving anyone a reason to suspect what he did after dark. One afternoon, as Liam mucked out stalls, he heard shouting from the main corral. The air crackled with anger and excitement. He dropped his pitchfork and ran, boots thudding over packed dirt. He saw them. 4 cowboys, rough men with rope-burned hands and whiskey on their breath, circling Shadow's pen. One of them, Big Jeb, with a crooked nose and fists like hammers, carried a lasso. The others held whips and long sticks. "We'll show that brute who's boss," Jeb bellowed, swinging the rope. "No horse runs this ranch but mine." The men advanced, hollering, snapping their whips. Shadow reared, eyes rolling white, muscles bunching under his shining black hide. The corral became a storm, dust flying, men cursing, hooves striking wood. One cowboy tried to grab Shadow's halter. The stallion lashed out, missing the man's head by inches. Liam's stomach twisted. He pressed his face to the slats, fists clenched. He wanted to scream, "Stop!" but the words stuck in his throat. The cowboys only got angrier. Jeb threw the lasso, missing once, twice, then finally catching Shadow around the neck. The horse went wild, bucking, kicking, slamming himself against the rails. Blood ran from a scrape on his shoulder, but Shadow didn't quit. The men cursed, sweating and red-faced, dragged along like children. After endless minutes, the lasso snapped. Shadow stood trembling, chest heaving, foam flecking his mouth. The men retreated, defeated and furious. "Worthless beast!" Jeb spat, wiping blood from his lip. "Not even fit for glue!" That night, as darkness swallowed the ranch, Liam returned to Shadow's pen. The horse stood in the far corner, shaking. Liam crept close, his voice no louder than a breeze. "They're gone now. It's okay. I'm here." Slowly, slowly, Shadow stepped forward. Liam reached out, palm up, not daring to hope. The stallion pressed his muzzle to the boy's hand, warm breath washing over Liam's skin. "You did good. You didn't let him break you. I won't let him either." For a long time, they stood together in the moonlight, one battered boy, one battered horse, sharing a peace no one else could touch. Liam knew it wouldn't last forever. Secrets had a way of coming to light. But for tonight, they belonged to each other, silent and unbroken. Somewhere on the ranch, a door slammed, a dog barked, and the world spun on as it always had. But inside the corral, trust was blooming, as fragile and fierce as wildflowers in the desert. Dawn crept in slow and smoky, painting the ranch in streaks of copper and gray. The night's hush faded into the usual racket. Cows bawling, men cursing, the kitchen bell clanging out a summons for breakfast. Liam awoke stiff and sore, curled beneath his threadbare blanket in the loft above the tack room. He sat up, blinking away a dream he couldn't quite remember, the memory of Shadow's breath on his palm lingering like a secret blessing. He moved through the morning chores like a ghost. Pitchfork, hay, water trough, repeat. The other boys barely looked his way. They'd heard the whispers by now, about Liam's midnight visits, about how the devil stallion was going soft. Some called him crazy, Others just shook their heads and hurried off before a foreman could hand out extra work. But Liam didn't care about their stares. He moved through the day in a haze, waiting for night, his mind full of the stallion's wild, haunted eyes. He saw his own pain reflected there. Loneliness, fear, a stubborn kind of hope that refused to die. It wasn't until late afternoon, when the sun was a coin pressed flat against the mountains, that Liam found himself wandering near the far pasture. He leaned against the fence, chewing a stalk of dry grass, eyes half shut against the glare. Shadow stood at the far end of his pen, tail swishing, ears flicking at flies. His coat gleamed in the dying light, black as secrets, marked by scars that told their own silent stories. For a long moment, Liam just watched him, feeling something inside twist tight. He remembered the day he'd arrived at Whitaker Ranch, bruises fresh from a sheriff's grip, hope already starting to rot. He'd thought maybe he could find a home here, maybe even a family. But the ranch only offered hard beds, hard work, and harder people. He learned quick to keep his mouth shut and his head down. He wondered if Shadow felt the same way. Taken from the wild, ripped from the only world he'd ever known. Penned up and beaten for refusing to obey. The thought sent a ripple of anger through Liam's chest. He wiped a sleeve across his eyes, ashamed at the sting. Tough, he reminded himself. That's what they want to see. But when he glanced back at Shadow, something in the stallion's posture, a slump to his shoulders, a quietness to his gaze, made Liam's walls crack. "Hey, boy," Liam called, careful to keep his tone easy, as if talking to an old friend. He climbed through the fence, boots landing soft on the sandy ground. Shadow pricked his ears, but didn't shy away. Liam reached into his pocket, pulling out a bruised apple he'd hidden from lunch. He split it in half, offering the bigger piece to the horse. Shadow stepped forward, nostrils flaring, and took it from Liam's palm, teeth brushing skin. "You and me," Liam whispered. "We're not so different. Folks see what they want to see. They don't care what's inside." He laid a hand on Shadow's muzzle, feeling the heat of life beneath his fingers. The stallion let him, head dropping, eyes closing for just a second. A sudden urge seized Liam. He glanced over his shoulder, no one in sight. Heart pounding, he swung a leg over Shadow's back, settling bareback against the stallion's spine. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Then Shadow tensed, muscles coiling. Liam held on, hands gentle, voice low. "It's okay, boy. I trust you. You trust me?" Shadow stamped once, twice. Then, miraculously, stood still. Slowly, Liam squeezed his knees, guiding the stallion in a careful circle. The world faded, all sound dropping away except the thunder of his own heart. He was riding Shadow. At the far end of the corral, a ranch hand, young, freckled, eyes wide as wagon wheels, stood gaping, shovel frozen in midair. "Hey, you seeing this?" he hollered, dropping the shovel and sprinting for the bunkhouse. "The kid's on the devil horse. He's riding him, bareback." Liam's spell shattered. He slid from Shadow's back, landing hard. The stallion tossed his head but didn't bolt. Liam ran a shaky hand through his hair, breath coming in ragged gasps. Within minutes, men spilled from the bunkhouse and barn, boots thundering, voices raised in disbelief. They crowded the fence, pointing, cursing, muttering about witchcraft and luck. Someone called for the boss. Liam stood his ground, one hand on Shadow's neck, chin lifted in defiance. For the first time, he didn't feel small. He didn't feel powerless. The ranch's social order, unchallenged for years, shifted that morning. The Whisper Boy and the untamable stallion had crossed a line no one could ignore. Liam saw it in their eyes, a mix of awe, envy, and fear. He helped Shadow through the evening, tending to a scratch on the horse's flank, singing soft nonsense as the sun dipped below the mountains. Later, lying awake in the loft, Liam stared at the rafters. Hope and worry tangling in his chest. Word would spread, things would change, maybe not for the better. But for now, for this one fleeting moment, he'd found something no one could take. A kindred spirit, a place in the world, even if just beside a wild black horse. And in the hush before sleep, Liam dreamed not of escape, but of freedom. Not of running, but of riding, fast and fearless, with Shadow at his side, no fences in sight. By the next morning, news of the miracle ride had raced across the ranch like a prairie fire. Everywhere Liam turned, men paused in their work to stare or whisper. Some shot him looks of grudging respect, others glared with open suspicion or jealousy. The nickname Whisper Boy stuck, now said with a mix of awe and threat. It didn't take long for word to reach Claire Whitaker. Claire was a force of nature, sharp eyes, sharper tongue, and a heart as tough as sun-baked earth. She ran the ranch with an iron grip, never smiling unless she meant to scare someone. Today she stood on the porch, arms folded, watching Liam muck out a stall. Her gaze cut through him, cold as river ice. "Gray." Her voice cracked across the yard like a whip. Liam straightened, heart racing, shovel clutched tight. He wiped sweat from his brow and shuffled over, boots scuffing in the dust. Claire didn't move. Her shadow stretched long across the porch. "You want to tell me why every man on this ranch is talking about you and that damn horse?" she asked, her voice too calm, her eyes hard. Liam swallowed, searching for words that wouldn't get him beaten or worse. Just luck, ma'am. He let me close. I guess he ain't as mean as folks say. Don't play dumb with me, boy. That stallion's near killed 3 of my best hands. Now he's letting a scrawny orphan ride him bareback? Either you're lying, or you're stealing something that doesn't belong to you. Her words stung, but Liam stood his ground. "I'm not stealing, ma'am. Shadow, he just needs someone to listen. He's scared. He's not bad." Claire's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You're getting soft, Gray. That's not how the world works. Out here, it's ride or be ridden, understand? Weakness gets you trampled." She leaned in, her breath hot in his ear. "You stay away from that horse. You hear me? Next time I catch you in his pen, you'll wish you'd never set foot on my land." Liam flinched, fighting the urge to step back. He nodded, eyes fixed on his boots. But Claire wasn't finished. She flicked her gaze toward the corral, where Shadow paced nervously, tail swishing. "I should have sent that beast to the glue factory months ago," she muttered. "Maybe I still will. Nobody wants a horse that can't be broken, just like nobody wants a mouthy orphan who can't take orders." Liam's head snapped up, fear slicing through him. "No. Please, don't send him away. I can help him. He just needs time." Claire's eyes glittered with amusement and something colder, meaner. "You think you're special. You think you can save him. Let me tell you something, boy. Out here, you save yourself or you end up in the dirt." She straightened, brushing imaginary dust from her sleeve. "You're done with Shadow. You so much as look at him again, I'll sell him to slaughter. Or maybe I'll just put him down myself. Either way, you lose. Got it?" Liam bit his tongue, rage and terror boiling in his chest. He nodded once, tight and sharp. Good. Get back to work. She turned away, already bored, leaving Liam standing in the dust, fists clenched and mind racing. He watched her go, hatred burning in his eyes. He stumbled through the rest of the day, body moving on autopilot. The other boys avoided him now, afraid Claire's anger might catch them too. Even the ranch hands gave him a wide berth, whispering behind rough, calloused hands. As dusk fell, Liam wandered to the edge of the corral. He leaned against the fence, heart pounding, staring at Shadow. The stallion stood by the rails, as if waiting for him, ears flicking at every sound. "I'm sorry, boy," Liam whispered, his throat tight. "I can't come tonight. She'll find out." Shadow whickered softly, stamping his hoof. The look in his eyes, accusing, lost, needing, broke something inside Liam. He spun away, marching down the lane, fists shoved deep in his pockets. Anger and helplessness warred inside him. Claire had all the power, all the guns, all the money. What did he have? Nothing but a promise to a horse that belonged to someone else. But as he trudged back to the bunkhouse, a plan began to form in the back of his mind. He couldn't let Shadow be sent away. Couldn't let the only friend he'd ever known disappear forever. Not after everything they'd been through. That night, as the ranch quieted, Liam lay awake, staring at the slats in the ceiling. He pictured Shadow alone in his pen, nose pressed to the gate, waiting for a boy who wouldn't come. He thought of Claire's words, "Weakness gets you trampled." He thought of running, of escape, of a different life. Maybe he couldn't save himself. Maybe he couldn't change the world, but he could try. He could do something, anything, to keep Shadow safe. He rose from his bunk, heart pounding, the beginnings of a plan flickering to life. If he failed, he'd lose everything. But if he did nothing, he'd lose Shadow anyway. And that was one loss he couldn't bear. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows and sweeping the stars clear across the sky. Somewhere in the darkness, two outcasts, one boy, one horse, waited for the first sign of hope, no matter how small. The moon hung low, a thin silver knife above the ragged horizon. Somewhere on the ranch, a coyote sang a lonesome song, its voice echoing across the barren fields. Inside the cramped bunkhouse, Liam lay perfectly still, eyes wide open, his body coiled with dread and resolve. Every creak of the old wood, every snore from a fellow orphan, sounded like a gunshot in the dark. But he waited. He waited until all the lights had guttered out, and the silence became heavy, expectant. Tonight was the night. He slid from his bunk, boots in hand, bare feet silent on the cold boards. He dressed quickly in the shadows, worn jeans, faded shirt, battered hat pulled low. He tucked a stolen apple and a heel of bread into his jacket, careful not to wake anyone. The battered pocket knife, the one his father had left him, pressed reassuringly against his thigh. Liam eased the bunkhouse door open and slipped into the night. The wind caught his breath, cold and sharp, carrying the scent of sage and cattle. He crouched low, creeping along the fence line, every sense on high alert. He knew the guard's routine, knew when old Pete's lantern would dip behind the barn. It was only a few minutes' window, just enough, if luck was with him. The corral loomed ahead, cloaked in shadow. Shadow stood inside, impossibly black in the darkness, his head lifted, nostrils flaring as Liam approached. "Easy, boy," Liam whispered, voice barely more than a tremor. "It's just me. It's time." Shadow seemed to understand. He paced restlessly but didn't shy away. Liam unlatched the gate as quietly as he could, hands shaking. He slid inside, heart hammering so loud he was sure someone would hear. For a long moment, boy and horse stood together in the gloom, both trembling. Liam pressed his forehead to Shadow's, breathing him in. "We gotta go now. She'll never let us be. I promise. I'll take care of you." He slipped the makeshift halter over Shadow's head, fingers moving quick from practice and desperation. Shadow rolled his eyes, sidestepping, but Liam kept murmuring, kept his touch gentle. Suddenly, a light flared behind the barn. "Damn it!" Liam hissed, ducking low. A voice, old Pete's, drifted over the fence. "Who's there?" Liam pressed his body to Shadow's side, willing himself invisible. Pete's lantern swayed closer, boots crunching on gravel. Liam's mind spun. If they were caught, it would be the end. Not just for him, but for Shadow, too. The old man paused at the far side of the corral, grumbling about coyotes, then moved off toward the chicken coop. The moment Pete's lantern vanished, Liam acted. He slid onto Shadow's back, clinging tight to the coarse mane. "Now, boy. Please, run." He pressed his heels into Shadow's sides, heart in his throat. For a split second, Shadow hesitated, then sprang forward, powerful, wild, silent as a storm cloud. They cleared the low gate in a single leap, hooves thudding against the hard earth. Liam crouched low, praying he wouldn't fall, praying Shadow wouldn't spook. They skirted the edge of the barn, ducked behind a stack of feed barrels, and bolted toward the rear pasture. Fences loomed in the moonlight, old, half-rotted. Liam guided Shadow to a weak spot where he'd loosened a rail that afternoon, hands numb with nerves. Shadow pawed the ground, eyes rolling. Liam hopped down, yanking at the rail until it gave way with a groan. He led the stallion through, quick and careful, then scrambled back on. The open fields yawned before them, silver and endless. A shout cut through the night. "There he is! Stop him!" Gunfire split the air. 1, 2 cracks, wild and far behind them. Shadow flinched but kept running, muscles bunched and straining. Liam clung to his neck, tears streaming back from his eyes. "Faster, boy! We gotta go, gotta go!" They raced through the darkness, wind tearing at Liam's face, the shouts and shots fading behind them. The ranch shrank to a smear of orange light and angry voices. Ahead, the wild stretched out. Brush, hills, the promise of freedom. After what felt like hours, when his lungs burned and his arms ached from holding on, Liam saw a cluster of shapes ahead. Old, derelict buildings left from some forgotten ranger outpost. He slowed Shadow, scanning for signs of life. Nothing. The place was deserted, the windows dark, the doors hanging askew. He slid from the horse, legs shaking, and led Shadow inside the biggest cabin. The roof was half collapsed, the floor layered in dirt and leaves, but it was shelter. Liam dropped to his knees, head spinning. "We made it," he whispered, hugging Shadow's neck. "We're safe. For now." Shadow nuzzled him, breath warm and steady. Liam fed him the apple and bread, saving only a crust for himself. They huddled together in the gloom, boy and horse, shivering but alive. Then thunder rolled in the distance, a storm building over the desert. Lightning flickered, lighting the cabin in eerie flashes. Shadow whinnied, pawing the floor. "It's okay, buddy. It's just a storm. I'm right here." The wind howled, rattling the old walls. Liam pressed close to Shadow, stroking his neck, whispering nonsense to drown the thunder. Both were shaking, Both were scared, but neither let go. Outside, rain began to fall, pounding the tin roof, washing away their tracks, their fears, their old life. For the first time, Liam felt the smallest spark of hope flicker inside. They had nothing. No plan, no home, no future, but they had each other. And for tonight, that was enough. The storm battered the old ranger cabin all night, thunder cracking like rifle shots over the lonely plain. Liam barely slept, keeping one hand on Shadow's trembling neck as rain hammered the roof. When dawn finally crept in, a dull gray smudge on the horizon, he felt like he'd aged a year. He forced himself up, stretching out his aching legs. Shadow nudged him for comfort, still spooked from the storm. Liam gave the stallion what was left of the bread, chewing a dry crust for himself. His mouth tasted of dust and fear. The world outside had changed. Rain had washed the night clean, turning the desert to mud and erasing their tracks. Still, Liam was jumpy. Every crack of a branch, every cry of a distant jay made his skin crawl. He peered through the broken window, searching the horizon for men on horseback, for the flash of Claire's truck. Nothing but empty sky and the ghosts of old cottonwoods. He knew they couldn't hide here forever. They'd need food, water, maybe even help. But who would help a runaway orphan and a killer horse? He felt the hopelessness gnaw at him, heavier than any hunger. Still, as Shadow pressed his head into Liam's chest, the boy set his jaw. "We'll figure something out. We have to." By mid-morning, the rain eased. Liam slipped outside, searching the weedy lot for anything useful. He found a rusted bucket, a coil of old rope, and, miracle of miracles, a leaky spigot that gave up a thin trickle of water when he twisted it with both hands. He drank greedily, then led Shadow over to drink too, splashing water on the horse's dusty face until they both managed a weak laugh. The sun broke through, turning the world gold. For a moment, it almost felt safe. Almost. A crunch of tires jolted Liam's heart. He whirled, pressing his back against the cabin. A battered Jeep rolled up the old road, dust curling behind it. For a wild second, Liam thought about running, but his legs wouldn't move. Shadow snorted, ears flat, ready to bolt. The Jeep jerked to a stop. A woman stepped out, tall, brown-haired, in dusty jeans and a sun-bleached press badge clipped to her vest. She looked more like a ranch hand than a reporter. She didn't shout, didn't reach for a phone or gun. Instead, she raised both hands and called out, voice steady as morning coffee. "Easy there. I'm not here to hurt anybody." Liam didn't answer. His heart thudded. He watched her walk slowly, careful to keep her distance from Shadow. "My name's Callie Morris. I'm a journalist, working my way across the Southwest. Saw the horse prints and thought, nobody'd bring a Mustang out this far by accident." She smiled, not unkindly. "Then I saw the smoke. Figured there might be a story here." Liam hesitated, eyeing her badge, her camera bag, her boots caked with honest dirt. "You from Whitaker Ranch?" She shook her head. "Nope. I met Claire Whitaker once, back in Santa Fe, but that was years ago. She struck me as the kind who doesn't take no for an answer." The boy relaxed a hair. You gonna send me back?" Callie studied him a moment, eyes sharp but not cruel. "Why don't you tell me what happened first? I promise. Off the record until you say otherwise." Something in her tone, gentle but firm, a voice that had learned to listen, made Liam believe her. He told her everything. About the orphanage, about being worked half to death, about Shadow and how the world had given up on both of them, about Claire's threats, about the escape, about the long, wild ride through the storm. Callie listened, not interrupting once, only scribbling a few notes now and then. She asked careful questions, but never pushed. When Liam's voice broke, she just waited. When he hesitated, she nodded, letting him catch his breath. When he finished, the silence hummed. Shadow stood beside him, as if guarding the boy. Callie finally spoke. "I believe you, Liam. I've seen what ranches like Whitaker's do to people. Kids, horses, anybody who can't fight back. That's why I do what I do. Because somebody's got to tell the truth." She reached into her bag and pulled out a granola bar, handing it to Liam. "Eat. You look like you haven't seen a meal in days." He devoured it in 3 bites. Shadow watched with big, hungry eyes, so Callie broke off a piece and tossed it to the horse, laughing when the stallion snuffled it up. Callie took a few pictures, not of Liam's face, but of the horse, the cabin, the muddy tracks. She listened to Liam's story again, recording it this time, making sure he was okay with it. She promised she wouldn't use his real name or the ranch's exact location until he said it was safe. As the sun climbed higher, Callie set up a camp stove and made a little coffee, letting Liam have the last of her crackers. She told him about her own life on the road, stories of good people and bad, of towns that looked away from trouble and others that stood up to fight it. By the time the sun began to set, Callie had posted the first details online. Not names, not locations, just the bones of the story. A boy, an untamable Mustang. A ranch where secrets thrived in the dark. She tagged a few animal rights groups, a couple of child welfare advocates. She watched the comments and shares rack up, her phone buzzing with every ping. "Looks like people care," she told Liam, flashing a tired grin. "More than you think." Liam could hardly believe it. Someone out there, maybe 1,000 someones, had heard his story, and they were angry. Not at him, but for him. Night fell soft and full of hope. For the first time, Liam let himself imagine a world where someone might actually come to help, where kindness was stronger than cruelty. Callie zipped her jacket, stretched, and nodded at the door. "I'll sleep in the Jeep, just in case. You and Shadow get some rest. I got a feeling tomorrow's gonna be different." Liam curled up beside Shadow, a blanket around his shoulders, and watched the stars burn holes in the black velvet sky. He felt the ache in his belly, the sting in his hands, but he also felt something new, a spark, a promise. Maybe this was how it started. Maybe the world could change after all. And in that quiet, he dared to hope again. Morning arrived in a rush of color and sound, the air alive with the aftertaste of rain and the heat of new hope. Liam woke curled against Shadow's side, the Mustang breathing slow and steady beside him, calm at last. Through the broken window, sunlight painted golden shapes across the dirt floor, promising, maybe foolishly, that the world was about to change. Callie Morris was already up, coffee brewing on her camp stove, her phone buzzing and dinging with every new message. She glanced over at Liam, eyes shining with a mix of exhaustion and determination. "Your story's everywhere," she said, waving the phone. "It's on a dozen animal rights sites. I've got a senator's aide asking for details. I've got folks from New York to California demanding somebody step in." Liam blinked, not quite believing it. In all his life, his problems had always been his alone. No one came running for an orphan or a wild horse. But the world outside the cabin felt different now, alive with strangers' voices raised on his behalf, They ate what little breakfast they had left. Callie scrolled through social media, reading aloud a few of the comments. No child should be forced to work like that. That ranch owner needs to face justice. We have to save the boy and that horse. Liam felt a strange pride and fear. He glanced at Shadow, who watched him with steady eyes, as if the stallion knew that everything hung in the balance now. It didn't take long for things to spiral. News trucks rumbled down dirt roads, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions into the dawn. Callie kept everyone at bay, shielding Liam from the worst of the chaos. But it was clear this wasn't a secret anymore. Then came the authorities. It started with a single patrol car. Blue lights silent but bright as it bounced up the rutted path toward the old ranger cabin. 2 deputies stepped out, hands loose at their belts, voices low and careful. Morning. We're here about the boy and the horse, one said, his eyes soft but searching. Son, are you Liam Gray? Liam froze, heart pounding. Callie touched his shoulder. You're safe. You don't have to go anywhere you don't want. But Liam nodded. He was tired of running. Yes, sir. That's me. The deputy crouched down, looking Liam in the eye. You've been through a lot. We're here to help, not hurt. Would you tell us what happened? So he did. The words came easier now. About the work. The bruises, the threats. About Shadow's rage and gentleness. About running for their lives. Callie filled in details, playing them the story she'd posted, showing them the bite marks and bruises that matched her tale. As Liam spoke, more cars arrived. Child Protective Services, animal welfare officers, even 2 plainclothes detectives. They listened, took notes, snapped pictures of Shadow's scars and Liam's battered knuckles. The next wave of action swept out like wildfire. Deputies radioed back to the county seat, and soon enough, a convoy of police and social workers sped off toward Whitaker Ranch, lights blazing. Callie squeezed Liam's hand. They're going to get her. You did this, kid. You saved him, and you saved yourself. Time blurred. Liam sat on the cabin steps, Shadow grazing on stubborn weeds, Callie beside him. He watched the clouds drift by, unable to decide if he was scared or relieved. He was both. For the first time, someone else was fighting his battle. It wasn't long before news broke. Claire Whitaker was in handcuffs, stone-faced and silent as she was led from her porch. The headlines screamed, "Ranch owner arrested for child labor, animal cruelty." News vans crowded the gates. Drones buzzed overhead, and crowds gathered at the road, shouting for justice. But all Liam cared about was what happened next. A gentle woman from CPS came and knelt in front of him. She looked him in the eye, her voice calm and clear. Liam, you're safe now. You'll never have to go back. We're going to make sure you're cared for, and that you and Shadow are together. He believed her. He had to. The next hours blurred. He was wrapped in a blanket, led to a cruiser, asked gentle questions about where he'd lived, how he'd slept, what he'd eaten. Shadow was loaded into a horse trailer, handled by people who spoke softly, who let Liam walk with him, hand pressed to his neck. As they drove away from the cabin, the only home Liam had known in months, he glanced back at Callie, who stood waving, tears in her eyes. You'll be okay, she mouthed through the window. You did it. The world spun, new and terrifying. For the first time, Liam saw adults fighting for him instead of against him. Social workers called him brave. Reporters called him a hero. Shadow was named a survivor. They became symbols overnight, a wild horse and a battered boy who'd refused to break. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Liam slept in a real bed at a safe house, fed by kind strangers. He met lawyers who promised to keep him with Shadow, who told him about new laws being drafted because of his story. Shadow, too, began his journey toward healing, checked by vets and fed sweet hay at a sanctuary. But the truest moment, the one that stayed with him, came when he stood, at sunset, beside Shadow in a green paddock, the air thick with the scent of clover and hope. "We made it, boy," Liam whispered, running his fingers through the stallion's mane. "We made it." And for the first time in his life, Liam felt what it meant to be safe, to be seen, to belong. The sanctuary was nothing like Whitaker Ranch, where the old ranch had been all dust and fear, with sharp corners and colder hearts. The sanctuary breathed with gentle order. Fences were smooth and sturdy, painted white, stretching out across rolling green fields flecked with wildflowers. Everywhere, there was motion. Horses grazing, children laughing, dogs napping in the sun. Liam stepped from the county car, clutching his battered backpack in one hand, Shadow's lead rope in the other. The air was warm and sweet, 100 birds trilling in the trees overhead. He blinked, disoriented by the sheer peace of it. A woman in jeans and a faded plaid shirt strode over. Her hair was silver, her hands brown and strong. "You must be Liam," she said, voice easy as summer. "I'm Janice. I run this place." Liam just nodded, afraid to trust the calm in her eyes. Shadow tossed his head, snorting at the unfamiliar scents and sounds. But Janice didn't rush them. She waited, giving them both space, then knelt and let Shadow sniff her palm. "We believe in second chances here," she said quietly, "for everyone." Liam didn't answer. His chest ached with hope and fear. He followed as Janice led them through the paddocks, introducing them to staff and a few other kids, each with their own ghosts in their eyes. The barn was bright and airy, not a chain or whip in sight. The hay was sweet, the water fresh. Shadow drank deeply, his body trembling with exhaustion and relief. Janice helped Liam settle in, showing him a tidy room at the end of the hallway. The window overlooked a wide pasture, horses grazing in pairs or alone, as free as the sky. The bed was soft, piled with real blankets. Not the scratchy old army kind. Liam stared at it, unable to remember the last time he'd slept without fear. A gentle knock on the door startled him. Janice smiled from the doorway. "Come on, let's walk Shadow together. He's got a lot to learn about trust, but you do too." They led Shadow to the training ring, a big open space with sand underfoot and flowers blooming at the fence line. Liam saw other kids working with their own horses, one teaching a nervous mare to walk over poles, another brushing a gelding with trembling hands. There was no shouting, no threats, just quiet words and patience. Janice watched as Liam circled Shadow, letting the stallion set the pace. "We use trust, not force. Horses and kids both need to feel safe before they can heal." The days blurred into a new rhythm. Each morning, Liam rose with the sun, rushing through breakfast so he could hurry to the barn. He mucked stalls, scrubbed buckets, learned how to check hooves for stones and how to bandage a cut. For the first time, work wasn't a punishment. It was a way to care, to belong. Shadow changed, too. At first, he shied at every new sound, his muscles coiled and ready to bolt. But Liam was always there, talking to him, feeding him apples, singing low-nonsense songs in the dark. The staff taught Liam gentle training techniques, how to listen to the horse's breath, how to watch for tiny signals of trust or fear. Shadow learned to walk on a loose lead, to stand for grooming, to accept a soft brush without flinching. Some days, the old pain would surge back. Liam would freeze when someone shouted by accident, or when a door slammed too hard. Sometimes, Shadow spooked at the sudden bark of a dog, breaking into a wild run that left both of them shaking. But always, Janice or one of the other staff was there. Never angry, never impatient. They'd just wait, let Liam catch his breath, and remind him, "You're safe here. Take your time." Slowly, the healing took root. One afternoon, Janice gathered Liam and a few of the other kids around a picnic table under a big oak tree. She handed out lemonade, her eyes kind. "I know you all have scars," she said, her voice carrying but soft. "Here, we help each other. Nobody's alone, not the horses, not you." Liam listened, surprised when a girl beside him, tiny and fierce, spoke up. "Sometimes I wish I was a horse." "They get to run when they're scared." Janice smiled. "Horses run, people talk, and sometimes you find a friend who runs with you or listens until you're ready." A silence fell, heavy and sweet. Liam looked at the kids around him, each with stories written in the way they flinched, the way they held themselves apart. He understood them. And when his turn came, he whispered, "Shadow saved me." He listened even when nobody else did. The others nodded. The wall between them thinned. As the weeks passed, more visitors came. Therapists, volunteers, sometimes families wanting to adopt a horse or sponsor a child. Newspapers wrote about Liam and Shadow's story, and people sent letters, drawings, sometimes donations. But the biggest change was inside Liam. With every sunrise, he felt less like a victim and more like a caretaker, a guardian for Shadow, a friend to the other kids. One morning, Janice handed him a slip of paper. It was official. The state had recognized him as Shadow's primary caregiver. He was stunned. "Means you're family now," Janice said, eyes shining. That evening, as the sun burned the sky pink and gold, Liam led Shadow out to graze. Other kids gathered around, some just watching, others brave enough to stroke the stallion's mane. Shadow let them, nostrils flaring but unafraid, his trust in Liam spreading outward like a beacon. By the time the stars blinked on, Liam was surrounded by friends, human and horse alike. The sanctuary, with its gentle routines and open hearts, had turned two broken outcasts into something stronger than their scars. And for the first time, Liam let himself dream about tomorrow. Not with fear, but with hope. Time moved differently at the sanctuary. Slower, but richer, each day layered with small victories and shared stories. Months drifted by, painting Liam's memories in new colors. The gentle pink of sunrise over dew-wet grass. The gold of autumn afternoons spent grooming Shadow. The silvery hush of nights filled with laughter instead of fear. For the first time in his life, Liam counted days not by pain, but by progress, by kindness, by the quiet strength he and Shadow offered to others. Their bond became the heart of the sanctuary's work with traumatized children. Shadow, still wary with adults but gentle with kids, seemed to sense who needed him most. The staff quickly noticed it, too. "There's something about that Mustang," Janice would say, watching from the fence as a new arrival, a little boy named Trevor, fists balled tight, slowly reached for Shadow's muzzle. "He listens better than most grown-ups I know." Liam had become something of a legend. Therapists and counselors told his story at orientation, how he'd risked everything to save a horse the world had given up on, and how together they'd outrun despair. At first, Liam squirmed under the attention, cheeks burning whenever someone mentioned the brave boy and his wild horse. But gradually, he realized his journey had become a bridge for others, proof that even the most broken could find their way back to hope. One rainy afternoon, Janice found Liam in the tack room, mending a bridle with careful hands. She carried a stack of letters, some addressed to him, some to Shadow. "You've got mail from all over," she grinned, waving the envelopes. "Texas, Ohio, California. You and Shadow are famous, kiddo." Liam ducked his head, grinning in spite of himself. "Feels strange. I used to think nobody cared what happened to me. Now folks are sending letters to a horse." Janice set the mail down, voice gentle. "They're sending hope, Liam. They're thanking you for being brave enough to care when everyone else looked away." The real work happened in the fields and barns, far from the headlines. Each new child arrived with their own shadows. Some flinched at loud noises. Others hid behind blank stares, all carried invisible wounds. Shadow greeted them all with patience, standing still as children brushed his coat, whispered secrets into his mane, or just leaned against his side and let themselves cry. One boy, Trevor, barely spoke for weeks. He'd curl up in a corner, hugging his knees, eyes wary as a wild thing. The staff tried gentle words, offered games and books, but nothing reached him. Until Liam brought Shadow by one quiet morning. "He won't bite," Liam whispered, kneeling beside Trevor. "He's scared too sometimes, but he likes company." Trevor looked up, doubtful, but curiosity won. Slowly, Liam guided his hand to Shadow's warm muzzle. The horse breathed deep and let the boy's small fingers tangle in his mane. For the first time, Trevor smiled. Just a flicker, quick as a falling star. After that, Trevor became a fixture in the barn, talking to Shadow about nightmares, about the things he couldn't tell grown-ups. Other kids joined, some alone, some in groups, each finding something unspoken in Shadow's dark, steady eyes. Liam learned as much from them as they did from him. He saw his old self in their fears, the jump at a slammed door, the flinch when someone raised their voice. But he also saw something stronger, the way trust bloomed slowly, fed by patience and routine, by gentle mornings and safe nights. He became a mentor of sorts, teaching the new arrivals how to brush a horse, how to read its body language, how to stand still and listen. It was hard work, sometimes heartbreaking, but more often filled with moments that felt like tiny miracles. One afternoon, as a thunderstorm rolled in, Liam found himself sheltering in the barn with 3 kids and Shadow. The rain drummed on the roof, and the younger boy, Eli, began to shake, eyes wide. Liam crouched beside him, voice calm. "Storms are loud, but they pass. Shadow doesn't like them either, see?" He nodded at the horse, who paced but didn't panic. Eli watched, then crawled closer, pressing himself to Shadow's side. The stallion stood firm, offering silent comfort. "See? He's brave, and so are you," Liam murmured. Word of the sanctuary's success spread. Soon, therapists from around the state brought children for animal therapy programs, citing the changes they saw in kids who'd spent time with Liam and Shadow. The pair were invited to local schools and community centers, sharing their story with children who'd never set foot on a ranch. One day, Janice approached Liam with a letter embossed with a government seal. "They want you to speak at the National Conference on Trauma and Animal Therapy," she said, pride thick in her voice. "They want to hear from you about what works and why." Liam's heart hammered. The thought of standing on a stage, telling his story to strangers, terrified him. But when he looked at Shadow, at the line of children waiting to brush his coat or walk by his side, he knew it mattered. The conference was held in a glassy building in the city, worlds away from the sanctuary's green fields. Liam stood backstage, hands trembling, breath shallow. He wore borrowed clothes and boots shined by Janice herself. When his name was called, he walked onto the stage, knees shaking. He spoke quietly at first, but his voice steadied as he described how a scared boy and a broken horse had saved each other. He talked about patience, about the power of kindness, about how belonging was built, not given. He looked out at the crowd and saw tears in their eyes, saw them nodding, saw them believing. When he finished, the applause shook him to his bones. Back at the sanctuary, life moved on. Shadow grazed in the field as children played tag among the horses. Liam watched, pride welling in his chest. The ripples of their journey, of pain turned to hope, spread outward every day. One evening, as dusk fell and the air shimmered with fireflies, Trevor tugged on Liam's sleeve. "Will you tell Shadow good night for me?" Liam smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Always." He found Shadow in the far paddock, moonlight brushing the horse's mane silver. Liam pressed his face to the stallion's neck, whispering, "We did good, didn't we, boy? We helped them. Just like you helped me." Shadow snorted, nudging Liam's shoulder. In the hush of the evening, surrounded by friends old and new, Liam understood what it meant to heal, and to help others heal too. And for the first time, he saw his pain not as something to hide, but as a bridge to hope for everyone who walked beside him. The morning sun spilled gold over the sanctuary, painting the fields and barns with a warmth that reached even the coldest corners. It had been 1 year since Liam and Shadow made their escape. 1 year since they'd run for their lives through storm and fear and landed somehow in a world that made room for second chances. The anniversary was marked with more than a celebration. It was a day of remembrance, gratitude, and hope, a gathering for everyone who had passed through the sanctuary's open gates. Kids, staff, volunteers, therapists, and friends from distant towns came together, sharing stories and laughter over picnic tables crowded with food. Some wore shirts printed with Shadow's silhouette. Others simply brought hugs and old memories, eager to see how far they had all come. Liam stood at the edge of the main pasture, watching the children play. Their laughter rang clear over the fields, blending with the low nicker of horses and the distant calls of birds. Shadow grazed nearby, calm and proud, his coat glossy under the morning light. Liam brushed the stallion's neck, lost in thought. He'd changed, and he knew it. The boy who once flinched at every shadow had grown taller, steadier. His voice had found a strength he never thought possible. Janice approached, carrying a thermos of coffee and a gentle smile. "You ready, Liam?" He nodded. "I think so." Today, for the first time, Liam would stand before a crowd, not as a survivor, but as a leader, a symbol of what healing and courage could accomplish. He was nervous, of course. Public speaking still set his heart racing, but this time he wasn't alone. Shadow would be right beside him. The gathering took place in the wide yard behind the barn, chairs set out in a half-circle beneath a spreading oak. Callie Morris, the reporter who had first told his story, sat in the front row, notebook in hand, her eyes bright with encouragement. Janice welcomed everyone, her voice carrying through the breeze. "We gather today not just to look back, but to look forward, she said. A year ago, this place was home to pain and fear, but also hope. Liam and Shadow remind us every day that kindness is not weakness, and that gentleness can be the most powerful force in the world. She gestured for Liam to join her. He walked out, Shadow at his side, and felt the quiet hush of attention settle over the crowd. He took a breath, let his fingers curl into Shadow's mane, and began. "I never thought I'd have a story worth telling," Liam said, his voice steady. "When I came here, I was angry. I was scared. I thought all people wanted was to break me or use me, the way they tried to break Shadow. But I learned something different at the sanctuary. I learned that gentleness isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing you can offer, especially to someone who's hurting." He looked at the other kids, some new, some who'd arrived the same day as he had. Shadow and I, we were both outcasts. We'd both been hurt, both told we didn't belong. But the people here saw past our scars. They believed in us before we knew how to believe in ourselves. A breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Shadow nudged Liam as if to say, "Go on. I've seen what happens when you meet anger with patience, when you meet pain with understanding," Liam continued. "I've seen how a scared kid can help a scared horse heal, and how that horse can help the next scared kid. That's what we do here. We help each other. We show that kindness isn't just something you give, it's something you build, one day at a time, together." He paused, meeting the eyes of the crowd. "Belonging is not given to you. It's something you build, with courage, with loyalty, with patience. It's something you earn by showing up, by telling the truth, by standing up for what's right, even when it's hard." Callie smiled, scribbling furiously. Janice wiped away a tear. Liam felt a calm settle over him, a sense of peace he hadn't known since childhood. People like Claire Whitaker tried to teach us that power comes from fear and control. But I learned that real power comes from speaking the truth, from standing together, from refusing to let cruelty have the last word. Every time someone showed me kindness, it changed me. Every time I was believed, I started to believe in myself. He looked down at Shadow, running his fingers through the horse's mane. "I want to thank everyone here for saving me, for saving Shadow, and for believing that broken things are worth mending." He drew a breath, voice clear. "I hope we all remember, even the most wounded among us can become healers. Sometimes, the ones the world throws away become the ones who make the biggest difference." Applause swept through the crowd, not loud, but warm and honest. Children rushed up to hug him, staff clapped his back, and even Shadow pranced in the grass, sensing the good energy all around. The rest of the day unfolded in laughter and light. Newcomers mingled with old friends, sharing stories of fear turned to hope. Liam and Shadow led a group of new arrivals on a slow walk around the sanctuary, pausing so each child could stroke the stallion's mane, whisper secrets, or simply walk in silence. The walls that once separated outcasts from the world had fallen away, replaced by bridges of trust and kindness. As the sun dipped low, painting the fields in a golden haze, Liam found himself surrounded by kids, all eager for stories. He sat with them under the old oak tree, Shadow standing sentinel, and answered every question, about running, about hiding, about the moment he first dared to trust. He saw in their faces the same ache he'd once known, the longing to belong, to be seen, to matter. And he saw something else, too. Hope, stubborn and bright, refusing to be snuffed out. Later, as twilight crept across the sanctuary and the horses grazed in peaceful silence, Janice sat beside Liam. "You did good today," she said. Liam smiled, eyes on the horizon. "We all did." In the distance, the laughter of children echoed across the fields. Liam leaned his head against Shadow's warm shoulder, heart full. He understood now that legacy wasn't just about the past. It was what you left behind in others, the kindness you paid forward, the truths you dared to speak. And as the stars blinked awake over the sanctuary, Liam knew that his and Shadow's story would ripple outward, healing, helping, reminding the world that even outcasts, when believed in, could become the brightest light for others.